Are you tired of being bad at AFL Fantasy? Well, chances are you are making one or a few of these mistakes. We're going to talk about it. You're listening to the Ball Boys. Let's go!
Hodge has done it from nowhere. Busting the goal from inside the field. Sheed from the boundary. Dusty.
G'day and welcome again to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Casey, and you can find me on Twitter at Ball Boys Fantasy. And I am joined, as always, by the man who never makes any mistakes, the faultless coach of the Oxlongs, Luke Roderson. How are you, my friend?
You made me cry in that intro, mate. I thought you were talking directly to me.
Obviously, well, maybe not obviously to some, but a little bit of a clickbaity title here. And, not to say that, these mistakes that everyone is making, or people who are not good at the game aren't making, but we're going to talk about some traps and some pitfalls that some people might be making that they can, if they can avoid, might take their fantasy game to another level.
The only reason you could make this list is because you've made all of these mistakes at certain
100%,
points throughout the
100%.
last 3 years.
You got to make mistakes. You got to break a few eggs to make an omelette, is what they say. So,
Nice, man.
So yeah, we're going to talk about some mistakes that you probably or might be making in your AFL Fantasy Classics side, and we're going to go through and talk about them all. And like I said, there's a few examples of where I've made these mistakes, where you've made these mistakes in the past, and hopefully, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing again, expecting different results. We can learn from them and have better outcomes in the future.
All for learning, mate. Let's get into it.
All for learning. Let's talk about mistake number, we'll go 10 through 10. 10 through 1. 10 through 10? 10 through 1.
It'll be a quick podcast.
Mistake number 10. Going too mid-pricer heavy. Now, the flavour of the winning team is always, I started these mid-prices and they were the winning pick for me. But I see a lot of the times in search for that season-winning pick, that team-defining pick, that people take too many stabs at this sort of a price tag. The thing that I think that it sets you on the wrong path is if you select too many mid-prices and a lot of them fail, you've put yourself in a tough spot to fix up yourself after those first couple of rounds. That pivotability, which you like to say, is not there if you have too many holes in a sinking ship.
Yeah, this is a good one to start off with as well. I think there's such a temptation for it, isn't it? Because you look at it's a little bit like gambling. Those are the big payoffs. Those are the ones that you know that if you get right, they're going to, like you said, they could be season-defining picks. But let's say, I'll try and, I guess, use an example. Let's say that there's 4 midfield mid-prices that everyone's looking at through the preseason. Well, if you start all 4 of them and, like you said, a couple go badly, it's very hard to then know where to go from those 2 that go badly because you've already got the other 2 that everyone was on anyway. And if instead you go with 2 mid-prices and 2 underpriced premiums guys that you have a little bit more certainty with, then those guys typically aren't going to fail for you. And if you get those 2 mid-prices wrong, then you pivot across to the ones that you didn't pick in your team. Whereas if you've got all of them there, there's nowhere to go.
Yeah, 100%. And I think on the flip side of this as well, as people being a bit too focused on getting like these rookies off your field when like the rookies, they outscore their price by such a large margin that we shouldn't be necessarily trying to get these good rookies off the field. What you should be trying to do is getting the bad rookies off the field. And so part of the trick in the early season is identifying which are the good rookies, which are the bad rookies, where are you leaking points, where's the biggest difference between the rookie scoring and those premium scores, and structuring your team up so that those margins are minimized. So, but simply just labeling a rookie and saying, I've only got this many rookies on my field, and if I've got more than you, that being a bad thing for my team, I don't necessarily think it's as simple as that. We need the rookies. We need the right rookies. So by having too many mid-prices, you're obviously you're choosing to fade some of the rookies at the start of the year, and especially after that first 1 or 2 weeks. If you then have to pivot to those rookies, they're going to make a whole lot more cash than these mid-prices are, except for maybe the very rare cases like Tristan Sherry last year. So you put yourself behind the 8 ball from the very beginning, just by simply getting a little bit too fancy, I think.
So if someone came to you and said, I want to start Will Day, Pete Ling, Cumming, Ollie Hollins, Doherty, Shearer.
If someone came to me and said they want to start Cumming, there might be a different conversation. But
Nice. Well played.
but the others,
That's encouraged.
yeah. We'll talk about that one on a different
If you
side.
can't have fun playing fantasy, then what can you do?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Come as much as you want, I always say.
Nice.
But yes.
This podcast is never going to get more mature, I don't think.
Never.
We'll be 50 years old and it will still be the same old
talking
shit.
about Cumming and the tit and everything.
Man.
Anyway,
Number
yes.
9.
No, I think pick a few, obviously, the ones you're most confident in, but you got to hedge your bets a little bit. Chances are not all of them are going to go the way you want. And if there is, say, for example, there is 4 that all pop, well, then you've always still got the chance of dropping a premium down to them and making that case. So I think you're more likely to succeed where you hedge your bets a bit that way.
Number 10, mate. We're off to a flyer.
Number 9, mistake that you are probably making in AFL Fantasy is you might be ignoring a player's run.
This is me to a T.
You might be ignoring them at the start of the season. You might be ignoring it during the season, just focusing on what that player can do, what they have done to that point, and you're not looking at the matchups.
Yeah, this is, like I said, this is me to a T. I've got numerous examples through last year where I did this thing, and it was Luke Ryan to me was one of the ones that was the most glaring. I think he just had that great run in the middle. He popped off. He was allowed to do what he wanted, and I was just of the assumption that coaches were going to let him to continue to do that. And it wasn't the case, and it came back to bite me in the bottom. I needed to consult the tit, and I did not.
Yes, no, always consult the tit. But yeah, I think a player's run is incredibly important. Now, it's more difficult at the start of the year because we don't have as much data. We're going off last year's data, but especially midway through the season when it is a bit more concrete, we know exactly what's happening and how teams are playing. It's a very, very important factor, I think, when you're making your trades. When you're also evaluating, has something worked to this point? If a player is performing poorly, is it because they're poor, they're a bad player, or something's changed in their role or something like that? Or have they just had a tough run and things are going to come good soon? So always consult that schedule and see who they've played, who they're coming up against in the future. I think it's a massive part that maybe both ways in the future, but also looking back can explain a lot of things that we tend to ignore.
This next one's really awesome. Number 8 is reputation over role, and I think it's an awesome time to discuss this one because if you look at the coaches that took the chockies last year in the number 1 and 2 coach, they're coaches that are reasonably somewhat new to AFL potentially, being the sport, and I think that kind of plays into their
so do you think there's something to this? Because I spoke about this, I think I tweeted about it like a few weeks ago, saying I do find it interesting that the last 2, the 1 and 2 coaches, obviously both Pommies, and I think Chris was here in 2017, Tom maybe in 2020 or something like that, and so relatively recently new to the game. I myself only started watching footy in, when did I watch it? 2018. Do you think there's a bit more to that fresh look at something where someone's a bit newer to the sport, they're not looking at the reputation or the name of a player and just looking at this player scores this in this role, it is what it is?
Yeah, I don't think it's everything, but I think there's something to it. It's kind of that Moneyball logic, isn't it? It's you're taking away some of those gut feel kind of things, those, I've seen this player do this before, or I've watched enough footy to know this, and you're just kind of boiling it down to the role that you're seeing, the stats what are the stats indicating, and then you're making your choice from there. So not everything, but I think there's something to this. This is a killer one when you have those players, let's call it like a Jack McRae in previous years, where you just have this inkling, maybe you can get back, maybe you can get back, but he's playing that half forward role, and everyone can see it, but it's just very, very hard to
what he's capable of, and if he's given the chance, but he's not been given the chance.
You mean you made a mistake 2 years ago?
English. Well, no, last year Tim English. I traded in Tim English because the year before he was a 1-19 averaging player. I should have just brought in Tristan Sherry. He was the guy that was dominating. So I made that mistake, and I think 2 years ago you might be alluding to McRae over Canelio. Just sort of hoping that this guy that can score in a good role. So yeah, I mean, obviously, I've made that mistake, and it's something that I'll try not to do again, because you've got to look at the here and now and not necessarily. We can use what's happened in the past to inform us what might happen if we think that there's going to be a change in role. But if that's not there, we can't just say he's done this before, so we can do it again if there is something different. So yeah, reputation over role. Make sure you look at the role.
Number 7, you've got here being cheap. Is this something that you know a lot about?
Yeah, no, I'm very cheap, man. But being cheap, specifically when it comes to cash cows and rookies, I'm talking about paying up on your bench. The old school mindset was filling your bench with basement price rookies to get the cash on the field. Now, a basement price rookie with an excellent role and excellent job security is better than someone who was priced more expensively, no doubt. But often, if they're basement price because they didn't play at all the season before. So you don't often get those Marlon Pickett's that walk into an AFL club on the grand final day and come to AFL Fantasy sides the next season as a basement price and play every game. So usually those players come with a little bit elevated risk of staying in the team year on year. And the best rookies are drafted early in the draft for a reason. They go to clubs that have the more likelihood that they can fit them into their best 22, the clubs that maybe struggled the year prior. So pay up for these players because they're more likely to make you more cash in the long run, despite costing you more initially. And I think that's the most important function of a cash cow is obviously to make you money. So don't get cheap when it comes to the rookies. I know sometimes it can be very tempting to go from the more expensive rookie on the bench down to a cheaper rookie to afford that player that you really want.
Mate, I've found the best way to pick a good team is just to not have a bench. The team you can get on the park is insane.
Yeah, I'm sure that would free up a lot of
Don't
options
take my
for you.
word for it, just try it. It's unbelievable.
But I'm sure we've all fallen into that trap where we just go,
Don't pick a bench.
Yeah, don't pick a bench. But just I've got this 300k rookie on my bench, but I need an extra 50k.
Yeah.
Oh, let's bring him down to this 250k instead and hope he's all good just so I can afford this extra guy. I think that's not the sacrifice you want to make.
Yeah, I get the impression it's a little bit of a trap as well because while it might get you off to a little bit of a flyer, it won't get you off, but it'll get you off to a flyer.
Only if it's still forward coming.
You got to do it.
Yeah, you got to do it.
But you're going to get caught by the pack very quickly when everyone's generating cash and suddenly you're looking for a loan.
And the thing is as well, if you start a more expensive rookie on your bench and they do flop, well then if you're looking to trade them out, you've got a bit more wiggle room in terms of you can bring them down to a more cheap rookie and you can actually still make cash. Whereas if there's a basement price guy that is a red dot, essentially, you can't do anything with that position because you're not making any money on the trade. So you can't make upgrades. You can't, go up on the other end of the trade. So it's a much more difficult position to sort of find yourself in to trying to fix that up at any point of the season. So yeah, a little bit easier to get out of that tight spot if the rookie does become a red dot.
We're flying through it, mate. Number 6, getting too attached with cash cows and mid prices. I reckon this is something that we even see in the preseason. People start floating names that they were a cash cow last year, and they're going to take that.
They have some good memories,
but I don't blame you. You do get attached to these guys.
You do, man. Oh, we love our players. They come on the end of season trips and everything like that. Yeah. But this is the thing I find for a lot of people, and again, it's an old school mentality. I think it came from the fixed trades or the fixed number of trade period where you only had so many trades to make, and so you wanted a cash cow to fully fatten up before you trade them out. You want to get them at their most expensive price, trade them out just before they start coming down, so you've maximized that. But if there's a good trade to be made and you need to cash out one of your good rookies early to make that trade, I say do it, because not only are you getting the earlier points on field, chances are the reason you're doing it is because you're getting in a player on the other end, a premium that's underpriced. So you might be sacrificing some cash generation from the rookie, but if you're getting a cheap player on the other side, that cash generation is gonna happen both sides of the trade. So you're gonna make cash with that premium going up in scoring because they're obviously underpriced. Plus, you're getting the better points on field, and you're probably going to get there a week earlier than other players do. And I think that is one of the big tickets to getting ahead of the competition, rather than sitting and waiting until... Who was the Freo winger guy last year? Sharpie. I traded him out before we went on this run of tons, but it didn't hurt me because I traded Nick Dacos for him. And so, yes, I missed out on a little bit of cash generation, but I got Nick Dacos at the perfect time. So I think it can set you ahead.
Milk the cow early. Are we milking the cow or are we killing the cow?
We're sending him to the abattoir, I think.
Oh, we're chopping?
Yeah, we're chopping. We're all about chopping here.
I think we should milk him too on the way.
Yeah, all the above. All the above. Just animal cruelty right up in here. But, yeah, so I think, don't get attached to your cash cows because they got to go. They're there for a purpose.
Cash cow's so good. The traders, all over it.
All over it, yeah, they love it. Should we move on to the next one?
We should.
All right, number 5. Following groupthink without considering alternative. And
What do you mean? That's all I do.
Well, we're a part of it, obviously. We talk into microphones and some people happen to listen. But when everyone has the same idea, it can sort of seem like, oh, okay, seems what's going down this week. Let's just do it. And sometimes it can be a bit of a FOMO feeling. You know, everyone's getting onto this player. Everyone's going to trade him in. If they go really well, I'm going to be left out. But do your own research.
Often it is for good reason. So I think, let's say 8 out of 10 times when that happens, you'll do your research and you'll go, oh, the group is right because there's a lot of very clever people out there. Content on Twitter and podcasts and that kind of thing. But I think it's a good point that you make. At least do your own research because then if it goes tits up, at least the only person you've got to blame is yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the thing. We'll blame you
as well. We'll find a way.
Go for it. Absolutely. Throw it my way. I can take it. But yeah, I think when you do your own research and it confirms what you're hearing, great. Awesome. You have the confidence to lean into it. If you could do the research and you can poke holes and challenge that notion of what consensus is, then that's how you get a leg up. That's when, if you go, oh, Jordan's sweet, do I really want him in R2? Am I going to get rid of Tristan Sherry? Let's trade him in R3, or let's just miss out on that. That's when you can get that leg up when everyone else is trading out Tristan Sherrys and Rowan Marshalls, and you can avoid disaster there. You zig while others are zagging. So I think it's difficult because, like you said, a lot of times podcasts and content creators are switched on. They do a lot of they spend a lot of time on that. But
too much fucking time.
Much fucking time. I'm not right every time. You're not right every time. Other podcasters, other content creators are not right all the time. So that's where you can, like Selby says, back your gut and be rewarded.
Very nice.
Go on the complete other side.
Oh,
number 4, going unique for the sake of needing to have a unique player. What are your thoughts on this one as a mistake that some people make?
Can I dig deeper into this as well? And it's just extending the question a little bit, but going against unique and going for a unique, are those two separate things as well, or do you kind of see them in the same vein?
It's a good point. I think they're kind of the same ilk in terms of are you just being a contrarian for the sake of being a contrarian? Yeah. Is Bailey Smith the obvious pick, and you're here going, no, I'm going to be different. I'm going to go against Bailey Smith. What do you actually stand to
Maybe
gain?
You just have really strong values. You don't want anyone in your team.
Maybe
bring it down the moral,
down the vibes. Or
bringing up the vibes.
Bringing up the vibes, maybe.
Maybe too much. Bring the vibes down a little bit. Just temper the vibes.
Just chill. Yes, I think that could be the same thing. It kind of goes back to doing your own research, but understanding that you going ahead of the grain at every possible point is increasing the amount of risk in your side.
I'm going to have a strong stance on this one. I'm going to say don't go super unique unless late in the season there's a very specific reason why you want to throw the Hail Mary. So it's a league matchup in a grand final. You're just outside the top 100 and you think it's your best chance to get a hat. It's for the highlights. Throw the Hail Mary then.
I think picking a lowly owned player is fine as long as that's not the reason you're picking them.
Yeah.
I don't think you should be picking them for the fact that they are lowly owned. It should be a secondary piece of information. If it was up to me, I would just never look at ownership. It just shouldn't be a factor at all. Because every player should be picked on their merits.
Who plays for Essendon? Leave it to me, mate. I had it covered.
I think it should just be a non-factor. So that's sort of my thoughts. So you can go against players, and I think that's fine, but don't do it just to be different.
Who's the most unique player currently in your starting lineup?
Oh, I haven't got a fully completed team. I think Bailey Dale was there at 4% at some point. Neil Erasmus was 2% owned. So those are players that obviously are unique, but
you Erasmus. No, I was going to get erased. There was something there, and I couldn't quite find it.
You tried.
I fumbled.
You miss every shot you don't take.
Oh, I thought there was like a bit of gear coming.
No.
Nothing
You got to attempt it. Sometimes it doesn't work.
Thanks for the encouragement, mate.
Yeah, that's all good. Number 3.
Oh.
Chasing scores. Well, we are all guilty of doing this in the past. I know I am.
Oh, it feels so good.
You see, what's that?
Feels so good. You trade them in and they've got that little last round,
Oh,
100, 150, and you add up and you're like, oh, bro, I'm on for a zinger this week.
And there's worlds where it works, but you don't get the score. You don't get the score that they just put up. You only get what they do from that point on.
Doesn't seem right, does it?
It doesn't. You should get at least some of it. But chasing the score, understanding, and this is what we talked about, the run and things like that. Did they just have an absolute killer matchup? Were there some weird things that went on in that game where 4 of the bench players went down and this player played 100% game time and they were just kicking the ball around and your player scored 180?
That happens. That sounds like a very specific example from last year, in fact.
That was Zorko. Even though he went on to have a great season. But there's like, you've got to go, okay, this huge score is this player, and often that means that they've shot up in price.
Yeah.
After they put up that good score. So they're at a new price stat than the week before they did that big score. Are they still value? Is what they did. Because the other thing is, and I've talked about this before, if a player has an awesome game, guess who else notices that? The other teams in the AFL.
You'd hope so.
You'd bloody hope so. So the team that they're versing next week have gone, oh shit, this player's gone absolutely bananas. We're probably going to not let them do that, or at least going to put some game plans in place to say that's not going to happen against us, because it's very easy to go, all right, well, and this often happens in the preseason. You see these players come out and announce themselves in the preseason, and then teams run to them straight away.
It's a little bit what we saw with Luke Ryan. It took a couple of games, but he had that big game against Melbourne in, I think it was in Alice, where we just watched that game. Melbourne got dismantled, and you just thought to yourself, well, teams surely aren't going to let Luke Ryan and Jordan Clark do that. But do you think that there's the little asterisk on this one that if you're not chasing a score, but if a player has a good score and it coincides with a shift in role or coincides with, more CBAs or something like that, and you see that as it's going to be a continuing trend, you're not necessarily chasing there. You're just getting on the back of what you think is the new role, right?
Yeah, and that's the distinction, right? Like, because every player can have a pop game in doing something, especially if you've got this big data set of like, okay, this player's done this role for 5 years. He's averaged 90. He comes in, he puts up 130 in this week. All right, is this a sign of more things to come? Or is it more of the same? Is it just one of the pop games that he's had? What's different? And so, that role change is the big thing, right? If there's a change in role, is there a player missing or something like that? Is there a new development within the team, a game style shift or something like that? The score is only one bit of the details. You got to dig a little bit deeper than that, and often it's the last thing you should be considering. It's okay, they put up this big score. Why? Is it going to continue? Is it value at this point? And those sort of things happening there. Number 2, and I think this is a massive one, which I think if and it's not easy to execute, and you can go too far the other way, but playing week by week, I think, is a big mistake that a lot of people make. And what I mean by that is you're just thinking, all right, what am I doing this week without a plan to happen in the next 3 weeks? You don't have a target for 3 weeks' time. And just going, okay, who's the guy I've got to get this week? Next week's trades be done, whatever. Who's the guy this week? And having that plan for the next several weeks, I think, is extremely important. I think the best coaches do this.
This is something that I, without inflating you too much, I think you do well compared to what I've done in the last couple of years. The only thing I want to pick the eyes out of is the seeming contradiction when we sit here and say to people, oh, you don't want to sort of plan on trading this person in at this point because there's so much water to go under the bridge. There's so many things that can happen in fantasy. How do you balance those two contradicting arguments? Yeah,
so like you said, there's a flip side. You can go too much down that road and sort of you get too hyper focused on, and you have the blinkers on. You don't sort of see the things that are there. So I think having a plan is all well and good, but being flexible as well is also still important. And that balance is tough. I mean, I don't get it right all the time. So I don't know if there's a right answer in terms of how you do that, but if you're not at least considering what the next several weeks are, I think you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. as little like things like cash. I've heard a lot of people talk about not wanting to have too much cash left over after a trade. I've never quite understood that argument because if you've got more cash after a trade for the next week, it just means more flexibility. It means you have more room to move. So if I'm making a trade in mind and maybe I'm choosing to bank a bit more cash because I've got something that I want to do, but then carnage hits and those trade plans change, well, at least I've got more cash and more flexibility to make other moves that maybe had I not taken that initial plan in mind, that I can now pivot with a bit more freedom.
Yeah, and that's not to say that you're dropping down to a player that you don't like just for the sake of pocketing extra cash on a week-to-week basis. But I do remember at stages throughout the year, you'd be sitting there talking me through your trades and going, okay, well, if I anticipate that this player X who isn't in my team is going to, give him a 90 this week, he's going to go up by about 20K. Am I going to be short there? I anticipate this player potentially dropping a stinker. So
and this is where like a little bit. I might trade out a player who is a good rookie a bit early because they've got more money on their head. And so I'm thinking in 2 weeks, I'm going to need that money now, or need that money then. So I'm going to trade out, this rookie on my bench who's worth 500K versus this other guy's worth 400K because I'm going to need that money to get the guy that I need in 2 weeks. I'm going to need to have an extra 150K on my bench because that's how much it's going to require me to make that trade. Those are the kind of things that I'm talking about here.
You better do well this year, mate, telling all these people things they're doing wrong.
I know. Hey. Like I said, I've made a lot of these mistakes as well in the past. And the last one, and I certainly have made this mistake, the number one mistake I think people do that makes them a worst fantasy player, myself included, is making decisions based on emotion. And
this is probably a life lesson.
This is a life lesson, right? But like, the biggest thing, and we talk about rage trades and never again lists, and I think that's all great in terms of like, you get your therapy session in on a Monday and a Sunday night.
You got to be making those trades.
You got to do it. You got to do it. But when it comes to actually executing the move that's going to make your team better, you can't have never again lists. You can't have the player that's like, oh, I had him this time last year and he killed me, so I can't do it again. I can't do it if the situation's different.
You're taking the fun out of fantasy.
I know. Hey, I'm all for bitching and moaning. Yeah, you hear me on podcasts. But you got to try and clear that out.
Yeah.
Have a system of some kind where you go, all right, if it's a rage trade, but then on Thursday you go to your actual trades or something like that. But every player has their price.
We're all picking Jack Macrae again.
Like,
it tells you all you need to know.
Sicily, a lot of people are considering if he's in the right role. All these players that you've sworn you're never going to have, but if something changes, you got to have them. So yeah,
what's the difference between trading and making decisions on emotion and that deciding factor going with your gut? What do you think is meant by that, going with your gut? Because it's something that we say on occasion when you're splitting hairs.
Well, sometimes you can look at data and data is data, but sometimes it could be interpreted certain ways. And I think the gut instinct is if you can spin something in a way that it makes sense to you, that's a way that I feel like you can use your gut. Like, okay, yeah, it may be the data isn't explicit in saying that there's something here, but if you can sort of spin something and go, okay, yep, no, I think I see this. You can talk yourself into that narrative using logic, and it might not be the narrative that everyone shares. Well, I think that's where going with your gut can be a thing. But if you're completely like, if you're just a Richmond fan and you just love Richmond players and you just, I'm picking Timmy Taranto, I'm picking Jaden Short, I'm picking all Nank because I just love them, and it's just I just want to. I mean, and that's fine too. But if you want to be at the pointy end, if you want to be winning a hat, I think you got to limit that as much as you can.
I love that. Take the emotion out of it. After watching you just ride the emotional roller coaster for 3 years straight.
Warple! Shot!
That's your number one lesson.
Yep. Do as I say, not as I do, Luke. Have you heard that one before, man?
I'll get behind you.
No, like I said, these are mistakes that I've made and will more than likely continue to make, but in our quest for being better coaches, we'll try and reduce them. Or we'll just fucking do it all over again.
Just send it, lick the stamp and send it.
Lick the stamp and send it. But yeah, just a little bit of a different video from us, guys. Let us know if you... we're taking a little break this week from talking about players specifics. I want to talk a bit more strategy. So let us know down in the comment section below what you want to see from us. And if you haven't already, go over to patreon.com/Ball Boys and sign up for our Patreon if you want to get exclusive Q&A podcasts, if you want to get my secret preseason projections, the Ball Boys blueprint, and a lot more over there. Join our league as well. Lots and lots of things to come still. So go over to patreon.com/Ball Boys. Like, subscribe. We'll see you guys later. Bye.